welcome to another edition of Behind the Ballot. I'm here, Jeff Waldorf here with Jordan French and Dan Spearin, my good friends and political experts, at least to me. Hey, guys.
Hey, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you as usual, Dan. Same thing. So last couple of weeks, we talked about a lot of different issues relating to this year's midterms. You know, we talked about voter fraud. We talked about Russia. We talked about voter apathy. We talked about progressive Democrats and if they're viable in elections. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to have some fun today. Let's talk about our prediction. So based on what we've learned over the past few weeks and what we've discussed, whether or not we're going to see a blue wave, is there a red wave coming? What's going to happen in some of these tight elections? And so, look, I guess I want to pose the first question. What, with all the discussions that we have, what was one of the first things that you guys came away with from that? And how does it apply to these upcoming elections? Dan, we'll start with you.
Well, as a representative of Sector 865, I feel it's important to talk about apathy and voting. And the thing that's really interesting about this election for me is we're in a situation where what we are dealing with and what we have to deal with is polling, if it is correct, means that it doesn't look like we're going to see a wave, or it doesn't look like we're going to see young people coming out. The Democrats are hopefully, going to see either young folks, millennial, younger voters, as well as people of color and minorities coming out in large factions to vote for their candidates. The problem is polling metrics usually, look for likely voters. So what's really hard about this election is if the wave happens, it's going to be hard to foresee it, because the people that the wave will be comprised of are going to be folks that aren't in those metrics and aren't in those polls. So right now, it looks like you're going to see sort of the usual midterm election, but I wouldn't be surprised if on election day you're going to see something that's uniquely interesting and actually a progressive wave. It really does depend on turnout, though, and who can get their voter base out.
Yeah, and so something that I talked about the other day is some polling that was less than stellar. Basically, GOP voters galvanized by the Kavanaugh hearings, by the Kavanaugh confirmation. Democrats, of course, not inspiring confidence. People like Joe Manchin voting in favor of confirming Kavanaugh, and decreased excitement among Democratic voters for being able to turn out in this year's midterms. So a lot of that is actually very worrying when it comes to a Democratic blue wave. And of course, the talk about a Republican red wave based on some of these wins. And so, look, I don't know. Like you said, polling is really based on likely voters. We're not sure. That's what's, that's what can be wrong. There could be a lot of excited voters who are non-voters before. And so it really is that weird toss-up, like you were saying. Jordan, what do you think? What was the one thing that, or one of the few things maybe that you got from some of our previous discussions that really kind of hit you when it comes to this midterm?
Yeah, well, up until today, I would have had anything to add other than to echo what Dan said. I got a lot of the same takeaways. I don't know if I'd call them takeaways, because I went into it believing mostly what Dan's outcome was. He came in a little bit more optimistic than I did, which is unlike Dan, but or maybe not. But breaking news this afternoon: Taylor Swift endorsed a couple Democratic candidates in Tennessee. So now the blue wave is inevitable, and Democrats will sweep both the House and the Senate once the Taylor Swift army of voters has been mobilized there.
I did see that earlier. Now, look, here's the thing.
That should be the story on every outlet. That woman can move tons of young white girls to action, and she's a force to be reckoned with.
So the funny thing about
Wait, hold on. I want to actually say one thing about that Taylor Swift thing, which is really interesting, is I hear a lot of like young white girls, but let's just take the stock for 1 second. Taylor Swift has been around for like a decade. Like Mike Huckabee today tweeted out snark about like too bad 13-year-olds can't vote. Taylor Swift is a millennial. Like she's born in 1989. Like she is not just appealing to 12-year-olds anymore. Like there's a large people 20s and 30s that are listening to Taylor Swift now. This isn't 2006. So like
if my friends list as a 31-year-old man who lives in an area where Taylor Swift just came last week is any indication, there are plenty of voting age white women who are listening to what Taylor Swift has.
And white dudes and LGBT folks, because that was part of her justification for why she didn't like Blackburn. And like, we like to snark celebrities a lot, but like, you know, it's better than, I mean, Taylor Swift defining late to the party, but you know, it is something that will actually not just be something that like young people obviously go, oh, okay. It's not so much that I think people are zombies and listen to their favorite celebrity, but it takes up moments in their news cycle. It takes up time in the entertainment report. It puts the election on the map in a way in places that it wouldn't usually be. The BuzzFeed pop culture people having to tweet about it, and the entertainment reporters tweeting about it, and sharing it on Facebook and stuff. So it's just another reminder that there is a midterm election, and like I think those things are always good.
Yeah, and you know what's funny about this too is that here you have Taylor Swift. Yeah, I know I'm going on with this way too long, but just one more thing to add on that is to a lot of alt-righters, she is like she was been called the Aryan goddess, right? They were so certain that she was as racist and hateful as they are. And so now people on the alt-right are having a complete meltdown, and it's hilarious to watch. But that's all I had to add on that one. But is there anything else? I mean, we covered a lot of topics. We covered, possible attacks on voter registration, like we saw in 2016. Voter suppression measures, things like interstate cross-check being put into place, things like that. Is there anything else that really kind of struck you about what we had discussed, Jordan?
Nothing uplifting or positive. I mean, I expect more of the same. I expect more foreign meddling in the elections, more ignoring of it if it plays out in favor of the party in power, more gerrymandering, more voter suppression. I mean, that's just the direction we're headed. It doesn't seem like the end of that is any time in the near future.
I think what this election really has solidified is that the path forward needs to leave white folks behind, it looks like. And I know that sounds sad, but it's like if you're a Democrat, despite, I really worry that they're going to take too much in building this. And if they take it on the chin on the elections, it'll be abandoned ship and go back to the working white class and move back to even closer to the center because this doesn't work. And that's the thing that I fear, I think, the most for your elections is because what you are seeing in poll after poll, like if you look at the Kavanaugh hearings, it was white women and white men who are on the fence on that. People of color in like drastic numbers believed Ford and was like, why is this person going to the Supreme Court? We have gotten to this really like status threat situation that we talked about before where white folks are just so easily scared and white fragility is like at an all-time high where I just don't know how the Democrats become a winning party by catering to those folks because they're literally running towards a cliff, and it doesn't seem like anything in a moral standpoint, whether it's sexual assault or racism or it's winning is everything. And when you look at that, when you look at those numbers, what was so frightening and scary to me was during that Supreme Court battle, the Republicans actually galvanized power like through the allegations. Like the numbers went the opposite direction. It should have gone, oh dear God, there's sexual assault. Maybe I should rethink this. It actually became a higher percentage that supported. So everything is just blood sport. Everything is just politics. Trump today came out and said it was a big hoax, and the American people have seen through this charade. And he's doing that because it's the midterms, and they're trying to be like, look at what Democrats will do to us. Get your base out. Steve Bannon has a documentary out, which is propaganda film, saying like they're coming for us, Antifa is going to punch you in the face, and all of these things are happening. And the Showtime show, The Circus, has actually been a fairly interesting show the last few weeks, following a few of the things of what's going on, and a couple of the interviews that you saw. One was with John Kennedy, who was on that committee that had to approve the nomination, and just though he said, I want to get this done with. I want this October 1st. That's when the court sits. We need this. Like they don't. It's so pure partisanship, and I'm not saying that Democrats don't have partisanship either. I'm just saying the system is so purely partisan right now. It really is at a scary place where I think that I just don't know. As I said, like when you look at the polls with Trump, when you look at what's going on, it feels like white folks feel threatened, but they're also unaffected by any of the changes in a lot of cases that Trump brings in and that brand of politics brings in. So it's a really scary time, I think. And if this midterm election doesn't provide the wave, I really think that it's troublesome, because you will see the whiter, older folks in that party, I think, point to this and go, see, like we were right. Let's go back to trying to get the white man in Michigan. And I think that that's a failed strategy that the Republicans will just keep beating you on.
And I think that there's an aspect of kind of what Dan said of like the way that was communicated was also communicated in the least effective way to white people. Now I'm not excusing a lack of empathy or a lack of critical thought. I'm dealing with the reality here of how people work. And, like a lot of from the 2016 campaigns on, around Trump, that a lot of this, sky is falling language has been around things that inherently, by their definition, don't affect white people. To Dan's point, like we didn't focus on like how, one, his incompetence, and two, his agenda when he is able to get something done. Both kind of, there's a confluence there. Like in the long term, dismantling of the federal government and the long term effects of rolling back, climate policies that really have no even multiplier on the economy anyway. Not that it would make them right if they did. But, things like rolling back these coal regulations and stuff like that are not going to add many jobs at all, because automation killed those jobs, not environmental regulation. But they are going to have long-reaching, long-lasting impacts on Appalachia and other parts of the country as well. And we didn't talk about that. So the sky is falling stuff that we focused on, and quite frankly, some of it did happen. Whether it was the immigration ban that had to be written 4 times because the government was so incompetent they couldn't write an executive order, or the whole families at the border, and then the separation policies there. None of those things, by their definition, affect white people. So we ran against Trump on the sky is falling, the sky is falling. And for the people that we were trying to convince, the sky has not fallen. In fact, things are arguably better in the short term. And for the people that the sky did fall for, well, they were already convinced anyway. They didn't need us telling them that. They knew that was how life, already kind of worked and was only going to go further that way. And we did not do a good job of packaging, the consequences of a Trump election.
We've talked about this in the last few weeks, but it really is crucial for me, where it is the idea is you somehow, whether it's through advertising, whether it's through, just rhetoric on the stump, there's got to be consequences for these people. Like there has to be consequences for people who lie constantly. There has to be consequences for people who smear, other people just for the sake of it and, to win. And unfortunately, so far we haven't seen these consequences.
Well, there are consequences. They win elections. Is the
yeah, there hasn't been consequences for those actions. That's exactly right. The exact opposite of what should be happening is happening, because that, and we talked about this before, but it's that when it comes down to partisans, when it comes down to your base versus my base, the Democrats lose that fight. They have to somehow appeal to people who aren't voting and get them interested in this process, and get them interested and engaged into the campaign, because what you're
so Dan, do you think that's not happening? Do you think that they're not exciting people and getting them into voting?
I think that there's a double whammy that's happened, which is, and this is where, you know, when we went into a long conversation with Ron Pacone the other week. There's a lot of people like us that look at the system, and we present the system because we see all the flaws and the cracks. And we come on every week and we talk about the flaws and the cracks. And there is a problem with that, in that it disenfranchises people, it gets people down. They feel like they don't have any power, so what's the point? And I think that what you're seeing is like, I'll give you a really good example. In other countries, that New York Times story that broke this week, that your president like literally committed, like, you know, just huge amounts of tax fraud, that's barely being talked about. That's barely getting oxygen. I don't know how in any other country every single person on the other side of that would be running on that. But there's this almost, I feel like the left was like, well, yeah, everything's corrupt. Big shocker. Like it became kind of like, well, yeah, of course billionaires are corrupt. The end. And that's the poison pill that I feel like we have to protect ourselves against when we're presenting stories to people and saying like everything sucks and the system's corrupt and everything's rigged. And because what we've seen time and time again is the left is not galvanizing on those ideas. The right is. The right wins the dystopian future argument where we're like everything sucks. They come out for everything sucks. They come out to clear the swamp, even though the swamp never leaves and it gets swampier. We, since Occupy, have not, and Barack Obama's second election, have not done well in making that case for things are corrupt, and that's why you vote Democrat. And that's where I think the messaging needs to get better and stronger. And I think the people on the left need to start thinking about how they're presenting. You know, I know a lot of news actors aren't really news actors anymore. They're commentators. And a lot of commentators on the left, I think, have to be rethinking that strategy of coming out every week and going, the world is corrupt, click this. Well, okay, great. But then are you giving people a reason to galvanize? Are you giving people also inspiration to do something about that? Or are you just giving them the, I knew it, everything sucks, the world, you know, I can't do anything, so I'm going to go out for pizza.
We work against ourselves too, to go back to my fable, you know, premise at the beginning. Like the sky has been falling for so long. I mean, there's articles out today about how Melania's Trump outfit kind of looked like a pith helmet. This is colonialism and stuff. And like, I mean, I get it. There's a real history there or whatever. But like, whenever you're trying to make a story about hundreds of millions of dollars of tax fraud that the sitting president committed, not while he was a sitting president, you'd be accused of misinformation. But like, whenever every single day everything is just cranked to 11 or whatever, because the guy is pretty incompetent and or corrupt, like you got to keep your powder dry, to use the phrase that I know TYT hates so much. But in this case, it's true though, because this has been his modus operandi, is to come out with scandal after scandal after scandal, so nothing sticks. And like there can't, because we have processes to you know, from start to finish and things in place to make sure checks are checked or check boxes are checked. Like whenever there's a new thing every day and we treat them all equally, then eventually people, you know, they, like to Dan's point, but from a little different angle, they get tired of it. You know, like we don't win the sky is falling. We don't win dystopia. And whenever a real thing like this does come out, then it's just like, well, you know, you treated, you know, the first lady's hat that she wore the other day with the same level of alarmism as you're treating this. So why do we give a damn? And I don't know. I feel like we're playing directly into their playbook there.
I did like to tweet, however, that it was when Melania was in that jacket standing in front of a monument. They were like, why does the entire Trump administration, everyone associated with him, look like Carmen Sandiego villains? And that's true. They do look a lot like Carmen Sandiego.
That's how you play that, right? You make the funny joke about it, and you play it that way. That's a great way to play that one.
But anyways, I do think that what we're looking at when you're talking about those issues is like, and that's sort of funny. Like it's sort of funny. Like Taylor Swift, in a weird way, we were making fun of it earlier, but in a weird way, that little we were making light of it. Like, we were making fun of it, but like, that bit that she actually within that paragraph did actually write why the values of the representative weren't her values. So she actually did put information in the actual body of the Instagram message. So it was sort of an interesting thing to see, because will that stick? I don't know. The image wasn't political, unfortunately. There was no like go vote, or like it was just Taylor being Taylor. But I don't know how you get people engaged. Like, it's really interesting to watch. If you've ever seen a documentary or anything, because I know most millennials do have no recollection of Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas, but if you watch that hearing, that plays out really similar to what we saw this week, which Clarence Thomas came out immediately. Now, Clarence Thomas had a much heavier statement because he invoked racism and lynching into his opening statement, which obviously has a lot more weight than a frat boy being like, angry. But it was the same technique. It was go straight political. This is all politics. Forget the allegations. Forget what the woman just said, because she's a liar. Though I won't now. The only thing that's changed is we've got better at softening our stances. So we don't say she's a liar anymore. We say we believe her. We just think she misremembered, even though science and psychology.
Credible. We don't say we believe her. She's credible.
That's true. There's a lot of those things, though. Like Susan Collins said that she believed her, but she might have misremembered it wasn't the same guy. Or like, there's
that's not even factual, though. I mean,
like, right. But that's my point, though, is that it's not. None of it's backed up by psychology or science, or it's all just a new way of saying we don't believe women, because we know the headline senator says that she doesn't believe or they don't believe is a super problematic thing for us in an election. But we don't really care. We're just softening the language so it's headline appropriate. So it's Senator Collins says Vic is credible, and then the article says but ...
Right. Don't you think, though, that this entire thing might actually galvanize people who are Democrats, especially women, to turn out?
Well,
no? You're shaking your head, Jordan. Why not?
Dan's got a better take on this than I did. So let him.
All right.
The take that I was going to say was the issue isn't whether it'll galvanize. The issue is will it all be a wash in how it galvanizes? Because it's also because of the way when you don't have shame and when you don't have any sort of moral compass, the Bob's your uncle, for lack of a colloquialism. Like, what they can do is immediately turn everything into politics and say, look what they're coming for us. They're coming for us. You better come out, because look how desperate they are. They're willing to, which Trump has gone full blown on and doubled down on hoax, right?
Which is nothing more than gaslighting.
Well, that has been the strategy. And like, also just to like interject on these things too, right, is that it's really important that people look into how this was made, and the PR firm that actually helped Ed Whelan put together that ridiculous Clue Twitter storm of this is what happened in the House and these are who, like, all of that she lied was orchestrated, and there was a lot of money put into it. It wasn't just angry Lindsey Graham off the cuff. There was a lot of money and time put into making sure that Brett Kavanaugh's life wasn't ruined, aka that somebody else's life was. There's a lot of money spent on that, and that, I think, didn't get enough coverage, that it was orchestrated. It wasn't just a magical Reddit theory. It wasn't magical crazy people on the internet anymore. These people are sitting representatives that are believing in things like women don't remember things properly, even though every piece of evidence says they are. There's credible politicians and people in power in the establishment talking about how it's a scary time for men, even though the allegations of how many false reports of sexual assaults are somewhere between 2 and 10, and even those numbers are inflated because sometimes people put when they can't find corroborating evidence, that being a hoax or a false report, even though it doesn't mean it's a false report, it just means that there's not enough evidence to take it to trial. And so that number gets inflated. The point of this whole thing that I'm trying to say is that when you ask the question about galvanizing and like, will this take Democrats and more women? Will it bring more women out to the polls? You would hope so. The problem is it's also bringing white women out on the other side as well, because they feel they're under attack. And just like we saw in 2016, white women voted for Trump. Just like we saw in the polls in the hearing, white women at 47%, I believe, or something. It's a high number. It was close to half also believed Kavanaugh. So it's the problem is the people who are on both sides that are getting galvanized right now or are getting motivated to come out, will there be, as we talked about before, will there be the folks that didn't vote? Will be those women? And let's just not say women. Let's hope that men saw this travesty in the last month and are like, no, like I care about my fellow people, and this has got off the charts crazy. And let's hope they come out too. But the bottom line is, it's got to be the people who haven't voted, which goes back to our problem of like, it's probably unlikely voters that bring a wave. So I'm not sure polls will do us right. And if polls do us right, it means folks didn't come out.
Yeah. Well, you know,
and then that goes to the gerrymandering thing that we talked about at the beginning, though, too. And Dan, I think it's the biggest problem I have with your Democrats have to drop hope for the whites is I get what you're saying. And it fits, you know, not only motivation trends and tribalism trends, but it fits, you know, demographics, right? That those are the groups that are growing. But at the same time, those are the people who are being systematically disenfranchised. So if you go after a group of people that is really hard to get them to be able to vote, who are already predisposed not to vote, I don't know, just from a strictly logistical, practical standpoint, that's the way to win back the election. Not that, I mean, you have fantastic points, and I totally see where you're coming from. I just don't know that the facts on the ground are going to make that the way to do it.
Well, let's be real for a second, though. Just to be clear, I'm not saying you drop. I shouldn't have said, maybe my language was poorly chosen. It's not drop whites you currently have. It's drop this idea that you're ever going to win the Midwestern white guy with the rifle back into your party, because that guy has gone off the rails. Right, but you're not Midwestern. So, but let's be real. You're also you are not a solution to win in Arkansas, are you?
Solution for anything, Dan.
That's fair. That's fair. But yeah, like, I mean, there's very few people that are going to be persuaded. They've already chosen. They've already bought into status threat. That they've already bought into these things. So this idea that if we just sweeten things a little bit more, if we just new and improved Democratic Party,
be a little bit more centrist,
right? It's not even about centrist for me.
Right. This is the Hillary Clinton strategy.
No, I know. Wait, hold on. I don't think that's true. I don't think it's about Hillary. I don't think it's about Hillary Clinton. It's not about Hillary Clinton. It's the same kind of strategies that they use.
Well, okay, but Bernie did not appeal to those folks either. What Bernie's doing now and trying to help that.
I'm not saying anything about Bernie Sanders' strategy. I was saying Hillary Clinton's strategy in the general election was let's appeal to suburban white people who are disgusted with Donald Trump. That was the strategy, and it didn't work because it's the same.
Not centrism either. That's play on Donald Trump's big weaknesses, which is exactly what we try to do with Kavanaugh, and has been the focus of our conversation for the last 10 years.
And that didn't work
because that does not work. That's different than saying, "Hey, I'm a pragmatic centrist that can govern." There was a time, I don't know if America still is that place, but there was a time when that message really sold in America, and it's something that if we go back a few episodes. Fair enough. If we go back a few episodes, I think I communicated poorly with Dan. Was that one of the big issues that I have with a lot of the progressive candidates that have come from, and why I just can't get on this conspiracy bandwagon that progressives are being systematically suppressed across the board, is because a lot of these progressives that are running clearly have no interest in demonstrating their competence and their ability to govern, and that's great for activism, right? It's not great for government all the time. And that's not to say there aren't progressives out there that are competent and have an ability to govern. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that whether it's just the crop of candidates we've had or just how they've chosen to campaign, for whatever reason, that's not a message that has come with an attempted progressive wave. And that, at least for, liberals in my vein, that's our big holdup. That's why we have a hard time just going full bore team, upstart progressivism, is because I know whenever you win, you've got to govern. And that's the thing I hate about Republicans, is they have no interest in governing. And so I don't want my side to just do that from the other end of the spectrum. Like, that doesn't help anybody.
I think the thing we have to put into play here is that there's a difference between change. There's a difference between change and winning. And to win long term, you need to change. And that's always the problem, because everybody in politics is short term, not long term thinking. Everybody in politics is, we've got to win the next election. That's the only thing that matters. And like, we'll die on any hill to win the next election. And what I was talking about when you said the Clinton thing, and why I don't like conjuring up images of Clinton, is because that's a disease that the entire Democratic Party has. It's not, and including Bernie Sanders, including what was derogatory, whatever you want, depending on who you are, believe in Bernie bros, right? I specifically do believe in Bernie bros, and I thought they were a problem, but I get that a lot of people don't on your side of the world. So what I'm trying to say is whether you believe or you don't believe, when you say something like, and you've heard me say this on your show multiple times, when you say something like, if Bernie had have been the nominee, he would have won, you're saying that he was more appealing to that white demographic. That's all you're saying. And that's what my disagreement comes in. It's a strategy that was employed by both sides, and only since the election have we seen that shift to maybe needs to be more outreach. If Bernie had got that vote, like if he had got a larger portion and he had reached out sooner, he might have done it. And that's what the narrative we don't see. If he had reached out certain people of color and he had built that coalition early on, he might have done better. But people of color went with Hillary Clinton in large numbers because there was a track record there of reaching out to those communities. That's a whole other conversation, whether it went well or didn't go well, but that's how the stats played out. So the point is, for me, is Democrats have to figure out how to engage people because they're losing the white vote the other way.
I mean, I'm not going to argue that they are losing the white vote. They absolutely are to Trumpism. And like you said, it's white identity politics. I mean, that's what the Republican Party is basically trapped into. Not necessarily trapped into, they're fully embraced. Like, yeah, we're the party of white, affluent people. That's who we are. And you know what? Guess what? We're winning. And look, you can't look around and say that they're not winning. They have a lot of the U.S. state houses. They have Congress. They have the presidency. They have the Supreme Court now. So at all the different levels of power that appeal to, fear and identity politics on the right has won them a considerable amount of power for the time being. The Democrats don't have that anymore. You're right. They should appeal to people of color and, minorities, but they shouldn't do it on their own version of identity politics. Partly. Okay. So let me rephrase that. There should be a little bit of identity politics in there.
But
there should also be policy.
Stop. But what is identity politics? Can you explain that term to me?
Okay. To go back, I know you hate going back to the Clinton references, but there is a special place in hell for women who don't vote for other women. That's the kind of stuff that irritates people. Take those kinds of examples and as what not to do, and take like, hey, I'm a progressive candidate who, is take Ocasio-Cortez was, I think is a pretty good example. She's not running on, hey, I'm a Latina female. She's running on, hey, there's significant issues here that we should fix, and this is how we're going to fix them.
Yeah, but the problem is,
I think belittling your voter base in general is probably a bad idea. I get that's the example, but
let's just push back on that for 1 second, because this is why, and this is, I feel, because there are three dudes here, that there needs to be some sort of balance, at least a little bit, trying in the narrative. The problem with the identity politics factor is nobody talks about politics of the white folk being identity politics. It's true. I get there's a few people that no, Again, I'm saying in the broad general consensus of the public, where identity politics always seems to magically come up is politics is when we have issues, and when you have an issue, it's identity politics. Arcasio says you need to erase who you are to win an election, or it's better when you don't talk about where you're from and who you represent, because that's more palatable to white folk is problematic. I know you are though, and I don't mean that you are in like a twirly mustache, bad white person kind of way. I mean that you're saying that if a woman says you should be voting for a woman because look at all these issues that affect women, that's identity politics. It's easy for you as a white dude to say, because the reverse is also identity politics.
So I'm gonna, I guess, split the difference between the two of you. I think it goes back to what I said. Whenever white folk play identity politics, they don't punch in-house, right? Like the other is coming after you. You need to vote for me because I will protect you for the other. And Jeff's quote, and it's not uncommon, Democrats have a hard time with that. Like Hillary punched at women. Like she punched in-house, and that's not a way that you go about doing it. Like, and I'm not saying that I want them to go to the other is coming after you either.
But that's a Madeleine Albright quote, is it not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but Hillary like referenced it though, didn't she? At one point during the.
Anyways, I mean, I get Madeleine Albright to Clinton, right? But I'm just saying. Listen, I mean, we're getting off the topic of this midterms, but I think the issue that I have is I think it's a very clever right-wing talking point that the reason why you're losing is because you're becoming more progressive. The reason why you're losing is you say things that stand up for women or people of color. That's the identity politics is why you're losing people. That's pretty clever, in my opinion, if you want to keep white voters, because if you want to keep the vote in the white box, you're going to win it. So anytime I see those, I think they're red flags for me. As somebody who's a liberal and a progressive, I mean, granted that I am a Canadian, so I'm coming at this from a farther left perspective than you folks are, but I am trying to deal with in the parameters of your reality that you're living in. And at some point, you've got to make inroads to those communities, and you've got to win. And that's why there's races that I think that we should be looking to. And I think the real barometer of success is actually how much ground was made up, not win or losses. And that's the fear that I have, is that win and loss is going to be what we decide this is experiment working on, when in reality, this is the first election that I've seen Democrats put actual mouth service, at least lip service to, we're going to like actually attempt something here. So it's a first time out really going hard in this strategy.
The problem with that, though, with the barometer thing, and I think you maybe mean it like more generally and ideologically, so this may not be a fair critique of your point. But if you're talking about, how much progress was made in terms of sheer numbers, the Republicans are watching those numbers and redrawing the districts to adjust and keep up with those numbers. And so in that sense, that barometer is not helpful at all, because until the wins happen and you can stop the redrawing of districts, then the numbers are just, it's a constantly shifting battle that they've got the upper hand in adjusting to.
Yeah, I agree with you but that goes to voter turnout, and that speaks to the original point, which is like, if you're a white person who is like Jordan, who, if I was looking at a photo of Jordan, would assume he might be a Republican if I was, profiling him, and he's not. Those are the kind of people we need more of. We need more people to come out and go, this is just wrong. Gerrymandering like this. Like Texas is a really great example of just a complete and utter disaster when it comes to democracy and how they're drawing up those districts. And the court has said no, but the politicians don't change. The problem is, what I'm trying to get at is that a lot of the times people of color and women's voices get pushed to the back because there's a narrative that's given that you can't win this race, only a white dude can. And that's what I'm trying to say is I 100% agree that the way to change politics and change America is through voting. It's not through your nonprofit organization alone. It's not through that thing that you volunteer with. It's not that millennial quote I keep hearing that drives me to pull my hair out when they say, I'm political, but I just don't get involved with politics. I prefer to take my politics away from the ballot box.
I'm not religious, I'm spiritual quote of politics.
Well,
growing up religious, I've had to deal with that concept before. Yeah. It's been a pain in the ass long before it became political.
but it's that problem of like you have all of your, not to speak to religious spiritually, but in this case, the only way that your nonprofit is going to be able to exist or make change or do anything is if it's somehow getting funded and if it's somehow being supported by government, et cetera, et cetera. So like there is, you know, a lot to be said about having to vote, and that's the hurdle. So it's like there's always going to be those people that are like, well, we have to give this nomination to the same old person because they won't win, and the problem is they don't win anyway. So this is where I'm trying to get to.
Sure.
Yeah. So I don't know. A lot of stuff discussed here today. I don't know if you want to give some just around the table quick summarize predictions. Red wave, yes or no, or blue wave, yes or no. We'll start with you, Dan.
Status quo.
Listen, I think the thing we forgot to talk about today, and it's funny because it gets lost in the new narratives that are presented themselves under Trump. But let's never underestimate. We're going to get rid of your taxes, and we're going to make things cheaper. The Black Friday election promises that always come through, more money for you, the individual, to be a consumer spender, and God bless America. Those things have worked really well for Republicans, and I think that's the only reason why the Occupy narrative saved us from Tea Party and Mitt Romney in 2012, was because that narrative was flipped on its head. Guess what? The rich have a lot of money, and this is Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and those types of politicians that were able to sort of thwart the government is evil predictions of the Tea Party, and now we're seeing a little bit more balance. The question is voter turnout, and I think it's silly to predict. I will say that when you see polls saying that millennials don't think this is that important of an election, this is sort of same old, when you look at the history of trends in polling for midterm elections, it's not great. And when you look at the actual numbers of the spike somehow with Republicans after the confirmation of Kavanaugh that are actually buying into Steve Bannon's narratives and are buying into Donald Trump's, blood sport narratives, it doesn't look fantastic. That all being said, these are not normal times. These are not by the book times. These are not times that we're living in where up is down and down. I mean, this is time where down is up and up is down and everything else like that. And
cats and dogs are living together.
Right. It is. So this idea that polls can lead us and tell us what's going to happen, I think is kind of cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So I'm just watching the voter turnout numbers, to be really honest with you. That will tell the tale for me.
Yeah. Jordan?
I'm waiting on the Taylor Swift bump. That's my last hope for America, is that Taylor Swift energizes the Democratic base in a way that has not been done since Barack Obama in 2008. If that doesn't happen, we're doomed.
Yeah, hanging your hat on Taylor. Wow, that's an interesting take, Jordan.
Never been in Taylor Swift's corner in my life, but now I am. She's in our corner, America, apparently.
Wow. Okay. Look, for me, so look, if I were to just look at the polls, I'd be very, very concerned. I mean, I did a video talking about this where I was like, oh, crap. Here we have voter excitement down to a very low level. And here we have Republican excitement actually pretty high. But then when you talk about likely voters or not likely voters, and people that turning out that normally don't, there's a little bit of hope there. Overall, look, there are some great progressive candidates that have won some of their elections, notwithstanding some of their some people, some of them not having experience in government, actually is kind of a draw. I mean, when you look at certain people who have gotten to certain levels of power, who had no experience, I think this is a little bit of a continuation of, we are still tired of the establishment. The establishment has a new name. It's under Trump now, but it is still the same old establishment that is operating under the same rules, i.e. give rich people more money, i.e. deregulate industry, i.e. screw over working class people and the poor. I'm not saying working class white people, but I'm saying working class people, because guess what? Working class is working class. if it involves Black people, Latinos, Asians, etc. Those are the same people getting screwed over, except that Black people and African Americans and all that, they're also getting screwed over harder. But they're all sort of in that same working class designation. These same rules put forward by the Trump administration continue the robbery from the middle, lower classes to the upper classes. And I think people notice that. People see that. And people are angry about that. And whether or not that anger will galvanize them to go run to the polls, that remains to be seen. But I hope, that is a small hope that I have, is that people can look at their pockets and into their bank accounts and realize Trump hasn't helped me at all. And Trump is actually hurting people, hurting my neighbors, hurting my friends, hurting my family. I got to do something about it. I got to push back and maybe make it so that he can't continue this path of destruction. It is a small hope that I have that all the terrible stuff that has happened with Republicans in charge, people want to push back against, and that they'll get excited to go out and do that. It's a small hope. I'd rather have people have something to vote for instead of vote against. And in a lot of these progressive candidates, there is. And I hope that combined with everything else is enough to get people to the polls. It's so important to go out and vote, to register. I can't stand when people say, oh, no, you don't understand. My vote doesn't have any power. I don't have any power. Well, you don't have any power because you don't use it. And so that's why it's important to get out and vote.
I think that shows how uneducated we are about voting in general, because none of these, it's a truism, but all politics are local. Even in the midterms, there's ballot initiatives and local elections and things that directly affect your day-to-day life, regardless of your position in life. And like, even if you're cynical and you've given up on the national conversation, which is not a good place to be, but even if I let you concede that, you need to vote in your local elections. That's your kid's school. That's your roads. That is how your local rules and regulations. That stuff matters.
Exactly. That's how the Republicans got into power in the first place. You don't think they shot for the top and immediately got everything. No, they started at the bottom. And that's what's the most important. But, and this might be a controversial opinion, but it's something that I've come to lately after the Kavanaugh fight. Republicans are, no surprise, Republicans are vicious, right? They play the game to win. But it's time Democrats start doing that, to play the game to win, but to play so at the bottom, and to start at the bottom and to work their way up, just in the way that the Republicans were able to seize power. I think that's the real only hope for America long term. As far as midterms, look, maybe we'll get the House, probably not the Senate. And that's mainly, of course, because the Senate, most of the people defending their seats are Democrats anyway. So that's like a majority, and a lot of red state Democrats, Joe Manchin, Heidi Heitkamp, Claire McCaskill, which are not doing well in the polling. Hey, who knew? If if you're Republican light, people aren't going to vote for you over the actual Republican. I know it's a strange concept that people don't seem to understand. But it turns out, no. What? Oh, sorry, Dan?
No, I was going to say, just to interject with that, like, that's the thing that I think that the real crux of all of this, I think it's really important to vote for what you believe in. I think it's really important that you go out and make sure you understand what's going on in your local elections, because that's what affects you on a day-to-day basis. But also, what both of you were talking about, what both of you have been saying, is that it's really important because there needs to be consequences for these people.
Yeah.
Like, there needs to be consequences. If you, like, everybody talks about the system is rigged, but let me tell you, as somebody who's interviewed politicians up here in Canada, I love politicians who try to do good, and there's a lot of people in power, but none of them want to lose their seat. They don't want to lose their job, just like you don't want to lose your job. And if they felt that there would be consequences to that actions, like this Supreme Court vote or like any other vote insert that you don't like, or you have to let them hear it. That's why Collins can walk in. That's why Collins is doing the talk show circuit this week trying to like explain herself, and
Yeah.
because her district and her place leans a little more left than the rest of those. That's why Manchin, on the other hand, in his left district, it leans more right, so he can get away with these things. And until they don't get away with it, it's not going to change.
Primaries matter. So if you guys are pissed off at Manchin, which you should be, primaries, we just missed a chance to elect somebody else to take over in Manchin's seat in a primary. You're going to have to wait till the next time, 2024. But you're right. Politicians have to know that there are consequences to their vote. I want our politicians to be afraid of us. On the left, we don't see that. On the right, we do see that. But not among Democrats. You know, there's that old saying, you know, Democrats loathe their base while Republicans fear it. And so that's where we're at. And until we can turn that loathing into fear, then Democratic politicians aren't going to represent us. So primaries, get involved. And get involved at the local level, which is really important as well. Local elections matter. Midterms matter. For the love of God, turn out. Or else we're going to be stuck in this Republican hell for the rest of time. Or until the basically Earth implodes from climate change. I think I'm pretty clear.
I just want to say, when we started this series, I had a name. And now not only do I not have a name, but I don't have a dog. So I just feel that the guests of this show aren't treated equally.
Thank you, guest 685.
What can I say? Janeway was provided by the Get Vocal team.
That is not actually true.
System is corrupt.
You didn't have a dog in your green room, Jeff? Or Dan? Yeah. Sorry. You didn't have a green room, Dan?
No, I had a janitor's closet that said guest 865 on it.
All right. So before we get going, I do have an interesting super chat to read from YouTube. Those of you watching the YouTube stream, you could also watch in the Get Vocal stream as well. And then afterwards be able to chime in with each other and have a conversation on what we talked about. But the Doomsday channel, aptly named, says Hillary Clinton will be brought to justice. Take $5 for your newscast. I may not agree, but I still watch it. Have a nice day and God bless you. Well, have a nice day too. Have a nice day too, Doomsday channel. I don't know what she's going to be brought to justice for, but okay then.
Hashtag the internet.
Well, hey, appreciate it. Appreciate that there are people with different opinions that can tune in and watch.
That dude came for the trolling and stuck around for the rifle.
Maybe. All right. So that's it for the midterm series. We'll have to see what happens, obviously, in the midterm. Hoping for the best, expect the worst. All right, everybody.
Go vote.
Go vote.
Okay.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Jordan.
Vote.
We'll see you guys later on. Thanks for joining us. Bye.